My name is Katarzyna Szymielewicz, Kasia for short. I work for Panoptykon Foundation, a Polish NGO that deals with surveillance. I'm also on the board of European Digital Rights, which is a network of similar NGOs working on the European level. I'm not here alone. I'm joined by my excellent colleagues. From my left, there is Jeremy Malcolm, working for Electronic Frontier Foundation. On my right, Joana Varon, policy hacker working in Brazil or internet governance issues and digital rights, and Niels from Article 19. You will probably tell more what you do because I don't know exactly, but that's less of the issue right now. Let me introduce the topic and thank you for coming. If you came for that discussion, which is titled, "What if I have nothing to hide?" I guess you have been asking yourself this question and you probably have some provisional answer to that question. So just to let us know how difficult this discussion is going to be for us, who answered that question, yes, I have something to hide? Okay, so am I right that all the rest answered, no, I have nothing to hide, really? Really? Wow, okay. So that's a little of the challenge.
Yeah.
Good. So I guess everybody on that stage here, on that side of the room, I regret it's like that. I wish it was more round table. We are here to maybe try to convince you that even if you feel that you have nothing to hide, you should be concerned about your personal data for many reasons. And before I move to open our discussion, let me give you my take on this and a short intro so that we are all on the same page. So first thing is that I don't think that hiding is the only valid perspective of thinking about privacy. It is presented like that by many of the big companies that communicate with us, like Google or Facebook, that really use that phrase. If you have nothing to hide, you shouldn't worry about us sharing your data with secret services. It's used by government, it is used by law enforcement and secret services a lot. I perceive this as a kind of blackmail thing, trying to push us in the corner of saying if you care about your privacy, it probably means you are hiding something. Of course, it's not what privacy is about. Even in the legal sense, privacy is about controlling your information, not hiding your information. So you can really share everything about yourself, but the way you choose. If you are the one who chooses the ways you share, and the audience with whom you share, and the people with whom you share, it means you preserve your privacy, because it probably means that you don't share that particular piece of your information with that particular person, right? So because you choose your groups. And well, how many of you have the feeling that you have more than one identity, that you have more than one audience with whom you share certain information about yourself? How many of you believe so? Much better, right? So in that sense, I would say you are hiding things, certain things you are hiding from certain people. You are not telling everything about yourself to your government. You are not telling everything about yourself to your employer, to your insurance agency, hopefully, to your bank, right? But you are increasingly forced to share everything with Google, Facebook, and intelligence agencies just because most of your information now goes in a digital format through the hands of the big intermediaries. And I guess that's what we will try to explain you today, that the fact that you believe you are managing your identities, but in fact you are sending all your data in a digital format through the net, almost all, but really I cannot think of one aspect of my life which is not digital in any sense. Work, entertainment, networking, whatever there is, travel goes somehow through internet, which means that I believe I'm managing myself, but really there are intermediaries from my telco provider to people, to institutions like Google that can see all that and can integrate all that and use all that for another purpose than we believed we are sharing. And that's where the problem comes. So it's less hiding, it's more controlling and being forced to reveal information that we thought we keep for a small group of people to somebody else, right? So that's one important aspect of that discussion. Second important aspect, I don't know how many of you are aware that you share more than you actually type and you upload. right? So it's not just the information we will discuss here today. It's not just the information that you upload, your pictures, your messages, your emails. It's all the metadata that is generated by your behavior. It's all the information about your equipment, your phone, your iPad, laptop, whatever there is. That metadata, the fact what time you connect, from what device, with whom you connect, what websites you visit, all that so-called metadata is extremely meaningful. Extremely meaningful. Things we like, things we share, like I like the article, I share it. It's also important information revealing things about me. There was an interesting study carried out at Cambridge by some researchers. I see some of you nodding, so probably you've read it, but it's worth quoting again and again, because Cambridge people took data from Facebook, the publicly available data, namely what people liked. They analyzed this data and they compared with the results of psychological surveys done on the same sample of people, of course with their consent. And they came up with very interesting correlations. It turned out that just by looking at the publicly available likes, people in fact revealed information like their level of IQ, their ethnic origin, their religious views, their political views, their sexual orientation, even the fact that their parents divorced in the past could be correlated. Of course, not because they said, I like the article about parents divorcing in the past, or I like the article about gay people. It's just if you have a big enough sample of people, you can. We were joined by Harry. Hi. Hello. So if that research revealed that with the big data, with the big samples of data that seemingly are irrelevant, you can actually dig inside and reveal things that people would rather keep for themselves, and they don't believe it's being revealed by just liking an article. But no, it is, because we are similar. We share similar features of character or behavior, and that's what betrays us. Betrays us not in a relationship between me and my colleagues, but between me and Facebook, who has how many billion users right now? I don't know, it's growing constantly. So with that big data set, you can really learn a lot about your users. So that layer of revealing us versus the intermediaries, it's something we don't often think when we are asked, do you have something to hide, right? We imagine what pictures I upload, what messages I send. Is there anything secret there? Even if it's nothing secret there, my general behavior, all my metadata might actually reveal much, much more. So that's the second important issue I would like you to keep in mind for our discussion. And finally, the third layer is the power struggle that happens in all that. Why these people, why institutions, state, intermediaries want that data at all? If there is nothing secret there, if there is nothing revealing that we stole or we are terrorists or we are whoever we are, if it's so irrelevant, why they store it and they analyze and they profile us at all? It costs a lot of money, right? So if you think about that data being actually used by somebody, you start to think there is a value in that data. There is, of course, commercial value, because by knowing you very well, by knowing your profile, by knowing your hidden characteristics, like your political views or your weaknesses, your addictions, your dreams, your health problems, somebody can actually sell you much more at a much higher price than without that knowledge. So there is a clear commercial aspect to this. And we are not the ones earning from that. We are losing because somebody is able to manipulate the price. Somebody like airlines, somebody like Amazon selling books, somebody like insurance companies are really able to earn a lot of money from that. So there is a commercial power, but there is also political power. If you are the ones who if you are a political party who wants to get re-elected, and if you are able to get from Facebook the data about real political views or real concerns of the people you target, you can sell them any story you like at the election time, right? So you get the advantage coming from information asymmetry that works to our disadvantage, our in the sense of being consumers or voters or citizens. So if you think of information as a tool of power, then the hiding, takes another meaning. It's not hiding because I'm afraid of something. It's not the hiding because I'm ashamed of something. It's the controlling or hiding information because I don't want to give that advantage over myself to somebody who wants to have that advantage. So that's the third aspect of how we understand the value of privacy, the value of data. I gave you sort of theoretical introduction, but I won't stick to theory. I think you will expect something more from us here today. And that's why I got all these nice people with me, who I asked to give us examples, stories, insight from their work. They're all active privacy advocates, digital rights advocates, activists who meet people, who learn from practice. So we will try to be as practical today as possible with the insight we give you. And if we are not, please make sure you ask more from us. So first, I think I would like to ask Joana, if you don't mind, to give us some, well, on the basis of your work you do in Brazil, your activism, if you can think of any examples of the power struggle I described, examples of how information, private information of people, activists, people protesting, people being politically active, people doing the same job as you do, that could be used against them by the government, especially in the political, because Brazil is the forum of very many important political fights at the moment for better, more free internet or whatever you call it. So I would like to hear these stories from you. And also I know that you did some research that you will like to be able to show us. So if you want to show us something, feel free to do it now.
Okay. So who here shares content in social networks that debating or criticizing or analyzing political decisions or artistical content that is related to political context? So maybe the answer of that question, together with the first question, if you have nothing to hide or not, this can be tricky because this kind of content, as Katja said, can be used to monitor networks and political views of people. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Brazil in the context of protests. In July 2013, we had a series of protests popping up in different cities for different reasons. And there was one particular day that more than almost 2 million people went to the streets around 400 states across all over Brazil from for different reasons. It might be the bus fare, the health care, the expenses with the World Cup, and LGBT rights and everything. So all those people went to the streets. That was the major day, but it continued throughout months. And then, of course, the government became concerned because we are going to host the World Cup, we are going to host the Olympics, and a series of monitoring of the social networks started, and profiles started to be built out of what people were sharing. And unfortunately, Brazil, unfortunately, the social networks were used in Brazil are between the major users of Facebook. So that tool was used to get people organized. And so the protests stopped a bit, but in the preparation of the World Cup, the state was getting prepared, integrating database, creating new restoring intelligence agency back from the times of the dictatorship, all in preparation for the World Cup, importing surveillance technologies from the US, from Israel, and so on. And in that context, I got very worried, and because of these practices, because people were not aware. So we did this project on Protestos, which in partnership with Article 19, to do a digital security guide, a visual digital security guide, bringing information about law and information about digital security. And our main goal was exactly to show and to answer this question. You do have things to hide, particularly if you are engaging in political activity.
Before you show the thing and say more about that, can you clarify us what, from your perspective, what can happen? Okay, assuming the government gets hold of information from social network about who is going to a single protest, why they do so, what network there is, what are the frustration of this network. Do you have any experience or imagination how that information could be used exactly? Could these people be, I don't know, arrested? Could the protest be prevented? Could they infiltrate the network? Things like that?
So I don't even need to use my imagination. Those things really happened. So for the World Cup, another series of protests started to get organized. Of course, in all those traditional networks, they were now being monitored. So what happened is when people were going to the protest to assemble, the police already knew the places, so they avoid people to get together, particularly in the day of the kickstart day of the opening. There were a big protests being organized, but people didn't manage to get together because the police knew the strategic and the plans, so they avoid, I don't know the wording, to avoid crowds to get together, crowd control and things.
Yeah.
So that's in one hand. On the other hand, a legal investigation was filed based on this research on internet and mapping the connections between people. They filed this legal search and started to investigate a huge number of people to get into the heads of one, and then people got arrested as a preventive prison, which is completely illegal, and even Brazilian authorities have said that, but that happened as well. And it was all because of monitoring. So at the end, we were doing digital security trainings, but people were even afraid of being this digital security trainings because there might be someone more involved on a protest, and if you are in a room with someone like that, you can be tracked and monitored and be part of that network even just because of being there,
Sure. Right. Do you want to show or is the website already there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to show together and then we can look in?
Yeah.
So
sure.
Like this and then we keep talking.
Good. So now let's move to Niels and please tell us more about the thing, but also from your experience working with free media, freedom of press and journalists, maybe some more examples of the possible consequences of surveilling people.
Totally. Hi, I'm super happy you're all here on this Sunday morning, and it took some dedication, and therefore I'm happy also to share some things with you. Maybe I'm gonna overshare, and maybe that's what we're all doing all the time, and maybe that could be an analogy, right? Because the online environment is a completely new environment, and I don't know if some of you people everyone encounters kids, and sometimes kids do not understand the social relations as we have set them as adults. So sometimes you're with a kid and he starts sucking your finger or pulls down his or her pants, and you're like, oh, okay, this is something you should not be doing, and then we correct them quickly. But for the digital world, we do not have this thing yet, because we do not understand the environment, because it's developing so quickly, and our bodily representation online for us is also completely unclear, because we're amassing a lot of data and leaving a lot of traces. And when we're saying I got nothing to hide, we might be thinking of a document that I typed or something like that. But you all know the crazy thing that if you're with someone and someone has Googled you, so in the first thing, it's like, oh, it's nice, that person showed some attention. But on the other hand, you also feel a disbalance because that person knows more about you than the other way around. And that can be odd. But let me talk a bit about working on digital security. And working on digital security is super frustrating because it's even harder than telling people to do safe sex. Because safe sex is relatively user-friendly. You use a condom. But when you want to do digital security, you first need to do threat modeling, and you need to understand who wants your data, what is your data, and then you all need these different tools to protect it. It's work. And the problem is, it doesn't pay out directly, because there's no one going to stand clapping, woo, you encrypted all your emails, you're safe now. No, on the other hand, you'll probably, if you share your data with Google, Facebook, you're going to get a lot of nice, easy extra services. I spent quite a lot of time running my own servers and do all like that to keep my privacy, but no one is standing there like, super. But a nice thing is that it works completely emancipating, because you take the technology back and you have this sense of empowerment. And this is what we wanted to do with the Protestos project. So let's stop talking about surveillance and privacy as these abstract concepts, because they are part of things we do. And protest is one of the things I think that are important, because they are a barometer for us to say something is going wrong and we want to do something about it. And that's why the right to assembly and the right to freedom of expression are part of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, right? So, and we should be able to do that. But this surveillance is hampering us in that. And that's what we wanted to show with Protestos, that a good protester is a secure protester. Freedom needs security. So instead of saying, no, you should be paranoid, you should be afraid. No, you should be efficient, you should be good, you should have your voice heard, and you should use digital tools to have your voice be heard, but you should also protect some parts of what you do. So I'm not saying go off all the social media. I say, no, know what you share where and have control of what you do not share. Have an economy. Know when you wear clothes and when you're not. Because right now we're standing in front of a window without clothing and we don't know who's watching.
So can we organize a protest on Facebook in that way that we still keep our clothes on? Or there is no way of reconciling being on Facebook and organizing protests on, okay, let's give, I mean, just any social network, basically, any commercial social network. Is this a responsible way of organizing protests, according to your research?
Okay, I'm going to give a happy and a sad example. I'm going to start with the sad example. And that's, I've been working with a group of Ethiopian protesters, Ethiopian bloggers since 2010, 2011. And they used to have a site, Zone9, and their site got blocked all the time. So then Facebook came up and they started to be on Facebook and post all their stuff there because Facebook would not get blocked. And they used their real names because people would trust them more. And we tried to do training with them in digital security, and amongst them they were pretty good, but they still used Facebook as their publishing platform. Now, 161 days ago, they got rounded up and arrested. And they're still in jail on terrorism charges. And statements have come out of the prison. And in that, they tell about their torture. And they tell about what the guards asked them. And the question that comes back every time is, why do you think you're here? And this shows that surveillance is not only a technical thing, but it's a thing that is getting implanted in our head, that we're starting to control ourselves, that we know that someone's watching, that there is no privacy, so we will start to censor ourselves. And this is what we see all around the world. And that's why surveillance is not only a danger to the right to the freedom of expression, but also a danger to the right to have a fair trial. That people do not dare to send emails to their lawyers because they do not know if it's going to be used against them in law. And that's why I think we should really protect what we have. Yeah. No, it's Facebook. So personally, the happy example is that you can use Facebook super strategically and with super fun pictures. For this Protestos project, we made a Facebook page and we made a lot of
After a huge debate, we made a Facebook page.
And we goes for Panoptykon.
So we started playing with the concept with saying like Nelson Mandela would use encryption, and Gandhi advises PGP, and things like that. And so to make it ridiculous and to make sure you do not share. But when you then access, make sure you're not leaving any traces or the way you organize. But then we also made pictures like, if you like this, you're going to be part of a critical group. Watch out. So creating this reflexivity on these networks about them.
But you give example of promotional activity, which is exactly, okay, when I started saying about hiding versus controlling, and I ask you how many of you maintain different identities, so you wear different clothes, so to say, in different situations. I maybe didn't mention a situation where we want to be very public, right? When we do something which is actually about getting publicity, getting as much eyes on us as possible. And that's, I guess, the example of promoting website like this. You created a good resource, you're proud of the resource, you want everybody to see it. That's the perfect situation to go on Facebook, because you really have nothing to hide in all meanings of that phrase, even though it's screwed up and we shouldn't repeat it anymore. So that was the last time I did it. But I ask you a different question. If there is a single protest you would recommend being organized through a network like that, in other words, is there a way of organizing a protest in a responsible manner being on Facebook? Or really we should always advise activists, be it in London or be it in Syria, to try and use different channels? There is no happy story here, right?
No, there is no happy story.
And
that is because organizing is a very important topic for me. Because I started off in media development, thinking with the concept that if everyone has all information, change will come. And then we had Occupy and Arab Spring, where everyone in the country and also here pretty much knows about the situation we're in. And we know about global warming, but nothing changes, yeah? So we need ways to organize, because current systems are apparently not dealing with the problems as we all are aware they should be dealt with in different ways possible, and we should discuss, but it's not moving forward fast enough. So we should find new ways for organizing. And if I would say to people, don't do it on Facebook, but I don't give them an alternative,
you say nothing.
Then I'm going to set it down. So Facebook is very interesting for gathering people and amassing people, but if you're going to organize a demonstration, meet up in person. And that's also super important to build trust and to have locality and to see each other. And then you can take it to an encrypted mailing list, or you can use encrypted chat. But that's also a process that you go through with your group, like agreeing on tools, teaching each other, discussing what modalities you use, and that's the way you also evolve. And that's, I think, one of the most important takeaways my most important lessons that I learned is that we do not have ready-made solutions, but the whole digital world is so new. No one knows what's happening, and people that say that they do are just consultants trying to make a lot of money, or politicians, because they really do not have it's new. So we should experiment and use different ways and test yourself. How far can you go? Can you use that 10-code password on your phone? Can you use a password manager?
Yes, you can. Okay, I guess protesters have these tips, right? I mean, on the website. So please, everybody who is interested in protesting and anyway perceives yourself as active citizen, go there, check these guidelines, because they're worth it. But okay, let's assume for now that you are not going to protest tomorrow. You are not a political activist. You are not engaging at all or you don't think you are engaging, because everybody is engaging in politics, we like it or not, passive or active, but you perceive yourself as consumers, you perceive yourselves as citizens who just want to have a good life, nice coffee, nice insurance, nice holidays. I'm turning now to Jeremy Malcolm, who knows something about that side of the picture. You worked a lot with consumer movements. You know a lot about the practices applied by private companies. So even if these private companies, like we mentioned, Google, Facebook, and similar big corporations, even if they didn't share our information with the state, which we know they do, and we know now the stakes, but even if they didn't, what would be the problems or the examples of negative implications for us being just consumers, just citizens that want to have a good, happy life, comfortable one, in relationship with the companies that know everything? Can you give us some insight into that?
Yeah, one thing we can all understand is money, like being out of pocket. If you're paying more for goods and services, then that kind of affects everyone. Whereas the more abstract arguments about you shouldn't expose yourself online, well, that really depends on what your values are, and you may be an online exhibitionist or whatever, you may not care. But in terms of going online to buy products and services, if they're costing you more, that really impacts everyone. And there are various ways in which that happens. So for example, geolocation. They can locate where you're coming from, and they can charge you higher prices accordingly. You may not know that this is happening, but there are a number of retailers that when you go online to their website, you'll get quoted a different price depending on where you are, even though it's the same website. Because what they'll do, they'll work out where they think you're coming from, and they'll look around your area to see, okay, how many competitors are there? Like, are they 40 miles away from the nearest bricks and mortar store where they could buy this product? If so, we'll charge them a bit more because we know they're not going to be bothered traveling 40 miles. So that's one way they do it. Another way that has been revealed is looking at what kind of computer you use. So a couple of years ago, it came out that the travel provider Orbitz was suggesting higher-priced hotels to users of Apple computers because they thought these were people who had more disposable income. They would pay more for a hotel. So also your general web browsing history. So this is a classic for Facebook because there are so many websites that have got a Facebook like button on them, and every time you go to one of those sites, they can track you. So they know where you've been. And they can build a profile of you. Not just Facebook, Google, many of the advertising networks that operate across websites, any website that's got Google AdWords, they can track you across a whole segment of the web and work out where you've been, what you're interested in. And they build up very stereotypical profiles of who they think you are based on what websites you've visited. So they've actually got classes of consumer like penny pincher, hardcore gamer, lonely heart. That if they think that you're gay, as Katja said, they'll pigeonhole you as being gay, even though you may not be. But if you are, they'll assume that you like certain things. So these are the stereotypical categories that they put you into, and they'll target an advertising campaign specifically for you, and they can be very fine-grained about this to try and sell you to the highest bidder. There's a real-life example, because we've been asked to give real-life examples. So a couple of years ago, there was a case that came out where Target, the retailer, had a database of people who'd spent money at their stores, and they would feed this into a computer with a very complex algorithm that could work out exactly what type of consumer you were based on what shopping you'd done. And they figured out that if you were a woman of a certain age who suddenly started buying more unfragranced products and cotton balls and things like this, they would figure out that you were pregnant, that you were in your second trimester of pregnancy at a certain time if you were buying this pattern of products. And so what they did was they sent some baby coupons to the house of one woman who they figured was pregnant. The thing was, though, she was a schoolgirl, she was a teenager, and this was a pregnancy that she hadn't revealed to her family. And her father came across these baby coupons, and that was how he found out that she was pregnant. So that's pretty shocking, and that's the kind of stuff that they can do. So you think you have nothing to hide? Maybe you do. Maybe there are things that you don't think you have to hide that you actually do have to hide. Now, one of the excuses we often hear from Facebook, Google, and so on is that, oh, well, this is just a generational thing, and young people don't actually care about this anymore. They don't care about privacy. It's just an old people thing. Get over it. And survey research actually finds that this isn't the case. So there was a survey that was done in 2012 which found that overall about 2/3 of people don't want to be tracked across the web. And within the younger age group of 18 to 29, it was still 60%. So it wasn't much less. These people don't want to be tracked across the web. We have to... There are certain things you can do. I know you don't want me to go into too many tools and things like that, but obviously turning off geolocation. There are anonymizing tools you can use. There was meant to be a web standard, maybe Harry can talk about this, called Do Not Track, that was meant to be able to stop you from being tracked across the web. But that was kind of infiltrated by industry lobbyists, and it didn't really go anywhere. But there are still tools, like my organization, EFF, has got one called Privacy Badger, which is meant to be like a replacement for Do Not Track, which forces the companies not to track you, whereas Do Not Track was more of an advisory thing saying, well, please don't track me. So anyway, this is just a broad overview why, even if you don't think you've got anything to hide, if it's costing you money, I think most of us would agree that you don't want to give up your privacy if it's actually going to cost you money.
Just one thing more, because you mentioned very interesting insights about the categories we are being fit into by the companies that profile us, right? So they give us even names. The names are sometimes offensive for us as clients. Can you imagine a situation where that kind of profiling is actually revealed to strangers, to third parties, to my work colleagues, to my boss, to my life partner, to my kids? In what situation the way we are being profiled by big corporations can actually reveal our features, say sexual orientation or to somebody else? Well,
they'll often tell you, oh no, this is completely anonymized, and you're just revealed, you're just being tracked by a unique identifier or something, which is a number. But there's also been research that shows even de-anonymized data can easily be even anonymized data can easily be de-anonymized so that you can be identified again, because the algorithms required can pinpoint, like, okay, there's only one person who fits all these descriptions who is in this area, so we know it must be you. So that can be done fairly easily. The other thing that we've found, many instances of this, is where data that's supposedly secure can be breached. The Apple photo scandal that recently came out, and many other examples. Like, I've just come from America, where I've moved in the last 4 months, and I found there was a data breach at Home Depot, which is where I've done a lot of shopping recently. My credit cards were out there in the wild. Other people were spending them. I didn't do anything wrong. It was their policies that were at fault. So you can't have too much faith in being told, oh no, look, we're keeping your data private, we're not going to share it with anyone, because who knows?
Yeah,
we got military-grade security, so it's all good. Trust us.
Sometimes some of these companies even publish your data for research purposes. A couple of years ago, AOL published search queries of, I don't remember exact amount of people involved in that, but it was a big amount of people, and they thought it was completely anonymous. Of course, it took 2 days for researchers to track back many of these search queries to real people with their real names, and that was quite troubling. I must admit that my search queries is probably the most intimate thing I share online. And if I imagine somebody using my laptop and then receiving the suggestions on the basis of my search queries, already that thing gives me some anxiety, right? So if you think that way, that Google will suggest something to somebody using your browser, and the minute earlier you searched for whatever service or thing you search for, well, that gives you space to think. But let me turn to Harry now. You work for World Wide Web Consortium. You know a lot about technology, and I'm sure you will mention some of the things that happen in the technology area that might help us. But please, let's not go into that too much because it's not the purpose of that discussion. What I would really like you to bring us is, again, more examples of the things that can happen to us average innocent citizens, maybe from UK perspective. What sort of implications from your experience as activist researcher you know about the use of data against us?
So I would just like to just quickly point out what happened. I work for the Web Consortium, so it's kind of nice. Tim Berners-Lee is the greatest boss ever. So if you're watching, everyone's watching.
You don't need to advertise
but regardless, the World Web Consortium does try to help defend users' privacy. We did have, and we still do. It's still actually under work. The Do Not Track standard. Now, the problem with the Do Not Track standard is not, yes, there was a lot of industry involved, as industry does tend to be involved in the real world. The problem was the Do Not Track standard was effectively a way that when you turn your browser on, you could tell companies like Facebook and Google, please don't send my data to third parties, like advertising bureaus, because they actually use your data often to customize the web page. So sort of useful for them. And the problem is that is not that the standard was broken. The standard exists. You can actually turn on today. The problem is that no government in the world, including very loudmouth ones like Germany right now, has the guts to actually regulate the large providers and the personal data markets, such as Facebook and Google. So, until we get a government of angels, we're going to be in that situation. And I think that many people, when you hear about privacy and security, you have this often this feeling that these sort of incidences that people describe in Ethiopia, for example, only maybe happen in places like Ethiopia, places where maybe with a failed state, crazy government. And actually, what you find is that they become more or less exceedingly common throughout, in particular, almost worse, throughout Western Europe and the United States. And a lot of this has been because under the rubric, relatively dubious rhetoric of anti-terrorism, most people's rights, particularly around data and around their privacy, have been stripped away by basically, we said, well, we had these rights because the Magna Carta or the Constitution or whatever, but because we're existing in this sort of state of exception because of Iraq war or bin Laden or whatever, that actually that stuff that you guys took several centuries to construct, that legal apparatus, we're just going to ignore it now because we have to find these bad Arabs from the Middle East. And actually what you find is that apparatus then gets deployed against ordinary people. So, for example, when I was coming here for the Web We Want conference, I was stopped at the UK border. It's not what made me late for this. It was Friday. But I asked them why, and they said, oh, well, they asked me, do you know? And I said, no, maybe you would like to tell me. And they said, we can't.
That's customary as well.
And then they proceeded to hold me for 2 hours, and I missed my Eurostar train. I was kind of irritated. And eventually, of course, they let me in. Who knows exactly what happened? I would love for them to tell me. But the fact of the matter is that, when you're entering someplace like the UK, you don't actually have any rights. So, for example, at the border in particular, if you come in, and this is also true actually within the UK, and you have an encrypted hard drive, right, on your laptop, and somebody like the police ask for your encryption password, for your password to hide all of your data, you don't actually have the right not to give it to them. It's what's called the RIPA Act in the UK. You actually have to give them your password, otherwise you can go to jail. Some countries, such as the United States and most of Europe, actually have laws against self-incrimination, although those laws tend not to apply at borders. So and what we found, and after I had this incident at the border, I said, well, it was interesting. So on Friday afternoon, I went to a lawyer, a legal forum group called Bindmans. And Bindmans are particularly well known for human rights law and data protection requests. And they sort of said, well, if there is something about you in some database, you do, and this is actually true for everyone here in Europe, you do have the right to get a copy of that data from the government authorities. Okay, so you can fill out a form, and within 40 days you should get it back.
Unless there's national security exception for that, but
well, exactly. So what happens is you can fill that out, and in general, what happens is the police say, well, look, there's a national security exception because there might be, I don't know, something really bad going on. And then what you find when you actually start looking at these national security exceptions is they're more often put in place to cover up the malfeasance of the government than to defend the actual probably rights of the citizenry. So within the UK, for example, Bymans has revealed that there was a large network of secret police, undercover agents, often undercover for many years, who were even, in an attempt to sort of disable relatively reasonable things like climate change protests, were actually even having children with protesters, infiltrating them, their groups, lying for years, and then mysteriously leaving the poor mother with the child, right? So you do have this sort of apparatus of surveillance control, even within
democratic.
I would hopefully civilized countries. You have to put quote marks on everything sometimes. So what I would say is that I think that the most interesting thing about what we can do is that, what we have to figure out how we can get some of these rights back, right? So we do have cases of protesters being unfairly singled out in the UK. We do have cases of just machine learning going wrong and people being shipped. And so often happens to Arabs, extraordinary renditions to places such as Guantanamo, where you are effectively, treated terribly badly based on false data. Right, based on data in massive databases, not particularly well verified. And if this process continues, it's going to lead us in a very dangerous situation. And so I think the most useful thing about the efforts such as the Magna Carta and the sort of digital security efforts is that we can imagine a way forward where we do have people who do get involved in these issues, understand they could negatively affect them and their children, and try to fight for some sort of web we want, where our rights are inscribed using privacy-enhancing technologies and ideally pushing back on the government when they do misbehave. And as we're seeing that more and more and more, I think we really have to understand that even if you think right now that Google, to be honest, is just, it's mostly selling your data, for advertising purposes. And, some people, like my father, say, I enjoy getting advertisements because it's often relevant to what I want. Or, you say, well, I understand, I support the war on terror because obviously, ISIS are a bunch of nut jobs. And I think, and Dave Cameron is a great guy, would never possibly do anything to me. At the same point, you never know. You can ask the people in Syria when your government will change, when things could go wrong. And, we're seeing even within Europe, because of the economic instability and all of this stuff, we are seeing some fairly nasty forces coming into the political sphere. And you never know when some of those get into power. And if they one day end up sitting on the massive databases of GCHQ, the NSA, Facebook, Google, what you think that you're doing today, which may, probably is perfectly normal, may be in the future judged criminal and used against you, and you may not even have the right to know what that is. Yeah. And that's very dangerous.
I think it's a perfect point when we could open for your comments and your personal stories. Harry gave us his personal story just now, and if any of you have similar experience or you heard about something, I think that's a perfect time to share it with everybody in the room. But please give us your feedback, your comments on what you heard. What do you think about that? Do you think there is this thin red line that you might cross tomorrow and you might find yourself under surveillance, or you still don't think what we say is relevant to you? What are your comments or questions if you have some? Do we have a mic? Yeah, we do.
Brave people of London.
I'm sure there are some.
I don't think anyone on the panel's talked about this, but is part of the problem that we've become addicted to free services and we're paying the price in privacy terms? Would there be a solution where we actually buy things in return for getting privacy? Or do you think even that will be corrupted?
No, I completely agree, and but it's not only in terms of money, it's also in terms of time. because there are alternatives. Yeah? You can run your own website, you can run your own mail server, and you can run that with your. It's actually not as different as buying with Tesco or buying with the shop around the corner with the person that you trust, with which you have a trust relationship, who gets the products from where you know it's coming from, and that's all. But that's an understanding we need to have. We don't see through the consequences of what happens when you Google. But when I then started exporting my data from Google a while ago, I found indeed the history of my search results, and then I thought, man, Google has a better memory than I do. Because I didn't know what little sicknesses I had like 1.5 years ago on that date when I stretched with sports, some things, and I looked for it. I searched for it online, yeah, or what I researched, what I thought about it. It's this unique library of my personal development. And I thought, wow, I want to have this data because this is excellent. I can play with this. But I really do not want Google to have this, you know?
Exactly. So sometimes we really want to have both service and data, but we want to have it on our own terms. And in that sense, I guess the solution that you described, that we pay for the service, doesn't really solve the full problem, because the data still will be with another company that can.
I'm thinking maybe Niels can set up his own web with email servers, with Amazon-like,
and
we can pay him for it because obviously you can't afford.
Yeah, but there are services like this. Some examples, please.
And there are services and small hosting providers that do so, and a free and open source software is the solution for doing this. The whole web is built on free and open source software.
It's not free in that sense. I mean, you couldn't run such a service for free.
Why not?
Well,
for free, no.
I mean, you can make arguments. So there are services that do more or less what you say. So, for example, if you're there's a company called Silent Circle, founded by Phil Zimmerman, who was one of the original guys behind public key encryption, and they offer secure chat, secure phone services. The question is, would you trust them? Who do you trust more? Do you trust Google or Phil Zimmerman? And, it's hard to say, right? So I mean, it really gets tricky. So often, and the thing people often forget about, I think, to some extent, I'm sure we'll see the rise of a lot of pay-for privacy services. But often, because of the way the legal regimes work, when you incorporate, and this happens in, I don't know about Britain, but in the United States or say France, if you incorporate, you say, hey, we're going to offer like privacy-aware, super secret services. The first thing the government says is, can you give us like a way to get to all of that? And if you can't, we're not gonna approve your company, right? So it is tricky, and I do think that there probably is. You'll see a lot of these things, but you have to be really look at them and be somewhat dubious sometimes of their claims. I have a friend who works at Google, and he says, well, like, do you really trust like 3 grad students running your server with your email, or do you trust me and our giant security team? And it's hard. I actually would prefer neither, but it's an interesting question.
We could demand keeping that line that we actually want professionals to do that. We could demand simply different kind of service from these professionals. And there is, I believe that if more people ask for encryption, end-to-end encryption, and I say I can send email through Google and have relatively high level of security if they allow me encrypt everything. So the content, okay, the metadata will still be out there, but still I can improve my security if the big companies allowed us to do more things that we would like to do, or would allow us to pay with the real money, not with data. I ask many times, Google and Facebook, why you don't allow that model? And they say, oh, come on, it's just not the way we do the business. But they don't give you the real answer. They still earn much more money with data mining your data than they would.
It's the economy, stupid.
With just having you pay $10 a year, even though the nominal price seems to be quite low. But anyway, maybe you have any other comments?
Can I also address that one about how it's not free to even use open source software because you have to pay someone to do it? In recent years, and even I'm just talking about the last 18 months, it's become a lot easier to just do it yourself, and it can be literally free. If you've got something like an ADSL connection at home, there are projects like Freedom Box, which are basically just plug in and suddenly you've got a mail server that you can use for yourself. There's another one called Own Cloud, where you can set up your own cloud services. It's point and click. You don't need to know Linux. You don't need to work out the command line. It's just downloading, going through a web interface saying yes, 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 and you've got your own cloud services. Now, admittedly, you always still have to be worried about security, because if you're not an expert, then maybe you're not going to be as secure as you think you are. But it's becoming much, much easier to set up these services for yourself for literally no cost.
You just
and
need
it's
to
fun.
It is fun, yeah.
So you're taking back control. So yeah, it takes time and it takes some effort. And
in that sense, it's not for free.
I'm actually going to disagree. I think the Freedom Box in many situations is very dangerous. That you should not mistake security for proximity, and having your personal data in your house is kind of silly.
But anyway.
Now we're going to the nerd talk.
Be...
No, it's not nerd talk. I think for Syrian human rights activists, the last place you want your data is in your house.
Please.
I mean, it's stupid. Hi. Is it not just sort of giving people false hope to advise that they, get their own cloud, which, if you can do it with a click and point, clearly anybody can get into that. It's not really secure, is it? And also, if you're getting encrypted, if you can do an encryption, some state security services surely have got the ability to get into it. So I just think that advising people to use encryption, advising people to, get some grad students who've got a new scheme to do their security, whatever it is, actually anything you put on the web is no different to just going out on the street and saying it. Sometimes you'll get away with it because nobody's listening, sometimes you won't. And I just think unless you have that mentality, you can't nothing is secure. If you're organising a protest with 6 close friends, one of them might be a police spy. You never know that isn't the case, which is not being paranoid and saying don't do any protesting. It's just me saying be realistic. Nothing is secure, and to even give the hint that it might be is, I think, irresponsible. Because if people send an encrypted message and they think it's safe, well, how do we know that the security services haven't cracked that encryption this morning and theirs is the first one they look at to show their mates what they've done?
But to do that, they'll have to target you and to know you, and then they'll pay and do more investment to break your encryption. So it's basically saying, yeah.
Almost no one I know uses encryption. So I think if you do, you're automatically making yourself a suspect. So, if you encrypt and you post political stuff in your... if you're an encryptor who posts stuff that's political, say, on your Facebook page, then you're going to get your post intercepted, your phone calls listened to, because they're going to think, well, why are they doing that? Well, so, I don't think the security services are so all-enveloping that they do that to everybody, but I just think there is a possibility that they might be, and therefore it's naive to think that anything that you do that's encrypted or anything you say in a room like this is secure, because obviously this isn't, because it's been broadcast on the web, but you know what I mean? Nothing is safe. And unless you're prepared to think that, unless you tell people that, you're actually leading them into dangerous areas, I think.
I think
it's just I think the comparison is like, why do you need to send postcards if you can send a sealed letter? And that's comparison. And on the other hand, if more people encrypt, then it's more difficult for governments to target the people that encrypt and are really doing activism and trying to protect rights or involved in political movements. So if you encrypt, you are also taking care of all the other people that are doing these political movements to make it more difficult to be targeted like that, as you mentioned.
I'd like just
I'd say that even though your assumption, I would agree with your assumption that 100% security is not possible, I completely disagree with your conclusion, nonetheless, that therefore one should do nothing, because one can be more secure. It's if we compare it to our houses, like I could relatively easily open the lock of your door or simply smash in a window, but we have a certain standards that we say that way we lock our doors. And if the level of criminality rises in our neighborhood, we maybe put on one lock more. That if we want complete security, we probably need to live in a basement and we never leave that basement. That's not what we do. So we look for a way in which it's manageable, in which we have acceptable risk, and that we understand what the risk is we take. And encryption is widely used upon the web. Every time that there is HTTPS instead of HTTP on the website, you see with the little padlock, you're using encryption. So it's not a crazy thing that some weird hackers with black T-shirts with text on it do. It's a widely used thing, and a lot of the technology companies also see now that we want and need to do encryption if we want to keep the trust in the web. Because this is not only a problem for freedom of expression; it's also for trust in the economy and the innovation of the web. We're throwing away something if we do not protect this.
Well, there's one very valid thing in your comment that I want to underline, the ecological aspect of this. You are perfectly right that the less people engage in these practices, the more exposed they are and the less it all makes sense. And that makes the privacy debate even more difficult. It's not just about our practices. We have to convince a bigger amount of people to join us, but also we can think of that as our responsibility for others, okay? So even if we today don't engage in practices that we might think they are worth controlling, hiding, or not revealing to everybody, think of people you communicate with, that you also have responsibility for them. And if they happen to be people who might get into trouble for any reason with politics or any type of surveillance, including commercial surveillance that Jeremy was talking about, think of your responsibility for exposing their information. We are officially out of time, I guess. We can probably continue that conversation over coffee if some of you want to have more comments, questions. We are here available. Thanks so much for coming and engaging in this topic. Thank you.